Hi, and welcome to today's Help Desk, Meet the Consultant. My name is Mixolydia Tyler. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Programs Manager at Arts Business Collaborative. We are super excited to have everyone here watching this conversation live or listening to the recording later. Just a little bit of background. I currently here am wearing a kind of rose-colored jacket, and I'm sitting with a gray painting behind me. And I'm sharing my screen currently to talk about what Help Desk is. So what Help Desk is a free program for business consulting for artists and arts organizations. This is a 3-month-long program in the fall that is designed to provide strategy and consulting around HR, finance, marketing, and development. Focusing on POC individuals and POC organizations that serve communities of color, especially those belonging to Black, Indigenous, and Hispanic communities. This live Meet the Consultant is being recorded and will be posted on our Arts Business Collaborative YouTube channel right after we start. I would like to thank and give a special thank you to our sponsors. ABC Help Desk is made possible thanks to the generous support of M&T Charitable Foundation, Ameriprise Financial, and the Mertz Gilmore Foundation. Also special thanks to Brooke Ottaway of the Nicholas B. Ottaway Foundation. I also, before we start, want to alert you and make you aware that there is more programming coming from ABC starting in winter of 2023. This is our fiscal sponsorship program, or FS+. ABC provides fiscal sponsorship and technical support, and you can learn more information about how to connect with us and to sign up for this next round of fiscal sponsorship by emailing us at programs@artsbusinesscollaborative.org. So just to let you know, we're getting into Meet the Consultant. And I'm excited to introduce our consultant for today. But just to give you a rundown, we're going to be having a conversation with Morgan J. Freeman of Freeman J and Associates. A little bit of background on Morgan. Morgan is a New York native whose biggest superpower is thinking through how you want to structure your business. What do you need to get started? And helping you understand what your market actually is through asking questions and taking individuals on that thought process. Coaching leaders around how to ideate when stuck and organize well-scaffolded plans that can move forward an organization to the next level. Morgan Jenkins is the CEO and principal consultant of Freeman J and Associates that focuses on organizational strategy and providing diversity, equity, and inclusion support to nonprofit organizations. She's also the chief operating officer at True Colors United, where she oversees the organization's operations, human resources, and finance. Morgan is a multifaceted consultant, and I'm super excited to have her here today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome Morgan to the space. Welcome.
Thank you, Mixie. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here.
Let's get started, Morgan. I'm so excited to be able to have this conversation with you. The last time we talked, you said some really great things that even myself, as an artist and as a business and a creative, a business owner, have been still marinating on, especially around pivoting. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I would love to start out this conversation with hearing more about your story, how you came to consulting. And I know that there's some ways and examples of how you pivoted into the place you are today.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So again, just thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure and a blessing to be in this space and share space with you this evening. So I started Freeman J and Associates in 2017, and this consulting business was birthed out of an idea that I had as an educator, and I had moved all the way from being a teacher assistant all the way through opening and co-opening a charter school in the South Bronx, right prior to the pandemic. So at this point, I was fresh out of the classroom and I was at a space where, and I was working within operations and really had a sense and understanding that schools were spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars every school year to send educators and administrators and teacher leaders and sometimes even parents to professional development. And you would go to these very, very expensive, very, very lavish professional development opportunities. And we're kind of getting a prescription that was just a general prescription. And the expectation was that you would be coming back home or back to your home school, your home campus, being able to implement exactly what you received at PD. So essentially the return on the investment that the school or the district was making. And oftentimes what you were getting at PD was amazing, but when you come back and you look at your direct population, it were almost impossible to actually fulfill those needs. So I started to think about and having a very strong sense of data and data analysis and student impact on data, and how data can actually drive student impact as well. I said, you know what, I need to start kind of consulting on this and creating plans and really understanding what administrators' needs were and how do we move student growth. And so I went through the process and filed for an LLC and, was like, okay, I've done it. I've done the paperwork. I've done the thing, right? Sat there, built a website, and nothing happened. It lay dormant. I had no clients. I had engaged in some initial conversations and some educators were like, oh, okay, but they were still at the end of the day looking for this kind of general prescription. And I couldn't really understand, why are we looking for this prescription for something that we really haven't diagnosed yet? And so I would say probably I got slightly discouraged, right? And just kind of just started to just focus my talents on my day-to-day work and leaving, climbing the educational ladder and getting my doctorate in executive leadership and having a doctorate in executive leadership that is really grounded in critical race theory, really falling in love with, so to speak, right? Or it finding me diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and social justice work. And so just by nature of my research, by nature of what I was being exposed to, I was moving further and further and further away from what I had originally thought of, like, I'm just going to analyze data because I know the numbers really well. And I know, which I still do know the numbers very well, right? But I moved away from that and really started to focus on the research behind things and looking at the phenomena that were occurring and looking at structures at play, right? And really wanting to undo structure in a very different kind of way. And also being able and having the skills and tools to be able to coach leaders inside of education and also outside of education. And how do you move your organization in the space that if you are saying social justice work is the work that I'm going to be doing, how do you start to pull apart at that work and really undo maybe prohibiting structures and creating new ones? And so I took a pivot with inside of my own educational institution right before the pandemic, and with the racial uprisings that were happening, whether I would say the racial awakenings, because they've been happening for so long. And it was the perfect pressure cooker. And next thing I knew, that I found myself being called upon to consult based on, oh, Dr. Jenkins knows this. She has this level of research. She's done the work on this. And I was like, oh, I think my whole work is completely shifting away, where I had to build a whole new website, right? I got a whole new clientele of people wanting to create diversity, equity, inclusion strategic plans, right? That wanted to even just get started, wanted to examine human resource policies, and just really taking this really deep dive. And if someone would have said to me in 2017, when I started my consulting business, that, hey, listen, some crazy things are going to happen, and your whole work is going to shift and your business is going to take off, I would have been like, okay, prove it. Right. And so now, right, I don't do any data work pretty much. Only kind of data work I look at right now is retention, employee retention and numbers like that, in a very different sense, but I'm not analyzing student data. I've thus retired from education. And as you mentioned, I work for True Colors United, a phenomenal organization where I get to still work with BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus youth in the community and really combating homelessness and housing insecurities, right? Which is like the perfect microcosm of all of the work that I've done probably in my entire trajectory. So, and they're an equity-based organization. So I do equity work all day long, right? It's very much a part of the work that I do and who I've become. So I would say that, yeah, the pivot sometimes I think finds us. And sometimes we find it, right? Sometimes we find like, wait, I'm being called upon about, like I said before, we had talked before about like the marketability, right? You as a consultant are the product. What your education, your level of expertise, your experience, right? That's what you're selling. That's the product, right? And I think oftentimes we get into this work and we're like, yeah, I do this thing really well. Okay, what else do you do? Right. And normally it's those things that we're not thinking about in any regard. Those are the things that end up kind of becoming what clients need or how we developed our client base around, I really need this thing. Can you help me build this structure? Or I'm really struggling with just openly how to communicate with my staff, with my team, right? How to set vision, how to set tone. And it's like, oh, I have resources for that. Let me just tell you. So I think that that is literally how I pivoted. I think it was like a match made in heaven. And it became like one conversation, and the next thing it was a speak at a conference, and the next thing it was, hi, I heard you speak. Can you come talk to my organization? We're doing this thing. And it was just word of mouth, and it just kind of grew and took off to kind of where I'm at right now.
I love that, Morgan. And I keep forgetting you are Dr. Morgan J. Freeman. I was going to put that doc. Don't let me not put the doctor on your name, friend. But what I love, and there's something else, again, there's always a moment, this would happen very early, where our consultants kind of echo each other and the things that they're saying. So you're echoing something that another consultant is shared, and we'll talk more with her about finding the idea behind the idea. Mm-hmm. So this concept of being able to, and it's not always that it's not that it will happen right away. Sometimes I feel like, and maybe you would agree, you had to go on that journey to maybe to tap into the thing that you really wanted to be doing now and to learn how to pivot. And I just wanted to kind of mine and ask the question around, you said sometimes the pivot finds you, and other times, you may have to look for that, other way of moving in your business. And so, I'm thinking about our creatives and creative businesses, and a lot of the time, especially people of color who are working, and a lot of times it's just access that is the problem, right? Access. And I think about access to time, for me, at least, in that, like, I don't have time to figure it out. I'm trying to like do the, I'm just trying to make it. I'm just trying to do it. A lot of times I don't have access to time to sit, to figure some things out for how I need to pivot. And so are there some pointers or things that you practiced in your own business, and things you could also share with maybe individuals who are just starting out, or even more hitting a wall and are looking for that, how to access the time that they need to kind of find the pivot, or allow the pivot to find them?
So this is funny. Kind of talk to my husband about this sometimes, right? I think naturally there's, in my opinion, there are two tracks that you can take, right? You can take a research route where, if you are very niche and you have a niche market, right? Go where your niche is needed. Do the direct reach out. And that's how I started, right? Educational data analysis years ago was just unheard of, right? For someone that's able to do behavioral data and academic data, right? That was not really, you either have one or the other, right?
Yeah, I was educated. You're very right. There were very few people doing that.
You can do both,
kind of work,
right? And both, and tell you the correlations between both. So at that point, I was like, okay, put myself out there. I do this thing. I'm doing it in my building. I'm getting the experience, and I'm kind of doing it in my network a little bit. But to your point, I had a little baby at home, a young child, and was getting ready to, didn't know that, right? Was planning a wedding and starting this business. And I was like, okay, this is gonna be my thing. This is just gonna be my thing. And then when I looked at my calendar, I didn't have time to do outreach at all, right? And by the time that I think that I figured out, hi, you have time to do outreach, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right. Right.
And I think the reality of that is that I also did not have a coach. So my second nugget would be like, first nugget, be honest with yourself about time before you take the investment, right? Because starting an LLC is expensive. Going through the legalization process, all those good stuff, it's an investment. So before you decide, I'm going to invest in my business and have a above the table legal business that is recognized by the federal government or the states, right? Already have a bucket of people that you might want to reach out to. So I've actually given advice at some point and say, hey, do 2 clients first.
Yes. Yes.
2 clients first. Do 2 clients first, then do your paperwork. Because essentially, you don't want to start your business off in debt. Some states, it's $1,000, $2,000 to have your paperwork to start your LLC done properly. So unless if you're sitting on a nest egg, right, you're already kicking out money from your new business before you've even bought in any revenue. So take the 2 jobs, right? Or reach out, kind of get your name out there. And when you get some traction, do your paperwork. Now, if you find from what you thought was your market, right? So this is kind of the second piece, and you have time to do the outreach, and you're doing the outreach, and you're out in the ether, and nothing is really coming up from the outreach that you're doing, reevaluate, right? But also being realistic with yourself and start having conversations about the things that you're good at. Start tapping into your networks. I have a really close friend who, when I was, we were in school together. And when I was starting the business, you know, because I had had so much charter school experience over the years of opening schools and looking at data, I was asked to help, just by word of mouth, help someone open a school. And I remember this conversation with my friend. I'm like, I don't know how much I'm supposed to charge. And she was like, dude, me neither. All right, let's figure it out. Like, what's your hourly rate? And I was like, I don't know. Never had an hourly rate before. I'm like, how do I write a contract, right? How do I do these things? And they become part of the conversation, right? And just the work that you do, if you're getting to this point, people have already noticed the work that you're doing. People have already started talking about the work that you're doing. So I would say the second thing is be prepared for people to come to you, because that will also help you figure out what you're actually supposed to be doing. People will come to you and ask you for certain things. Monetize those things. Think about to yourself, well, if I had to sit with someone, how much would I charge them an hour? Do I do a discount because maybe I know them? Do I start at one rate right now and then move my rate later? How am I going to navigate those things? And I think that those are all really honest questions. Do I know how to access a basic consultant contract? Do I want to be on a retainer, right? Which says I'm going to be in a contractual agreement with you for X amount of months, but this is my flat rate, right? Or am I going to create a scope of work for you and bill you based on timelines? What are the pros and cons of that, right? And so I think that when people start coming to you, or people start saying, hey, there's this thing, I think you should go talk at this thing, or I think that these people, I was talking to a friend, take the step out there and say, give me the contact information. engage in a conversation. One thing that I've done is with many of my clients, right? Because I'm not leaning on the business right now as my bread and butter, right? But I enjoy having conversations with people. And I've also learned, right, from the like not having time to get the clients, then people coming to me and asking me for the things. I've kind of become very secure, right? I've quieted the imposter syndrome. I've realized that I am qualified to do the work that I'm doing, even though, yes, I have a doctorate and I've been doing this for a number of years, that I can charge the rate that I want to charge. But in doing so, right, every client is not your client. So I always do a very free complimentary intro conversation. And it's really, for me, it's about the synergy. If I get into a conversation and you're asking me for things that I am very capable of doing, but our synergy is not right, or you're not really deeply ingrained with having a cisgender Black woman do this work for you, you're not my client. So I think that, like, that's also really important to understand. And I know for some consultants, it's like, look, I'm just here for the money. I don't care. I'll deal with it. Because this is not my bread and butter, I would say I can be a little bit more selective, because I know that how our relationship will be in working together will directly impact my product that I will give you. So that's something too.
And I really, again, so many things that you just said is right in line with some of the other talks. And so already I'm hearing trends around something that Alex Brunson shared, which was also like getting your community together, like having people that you can consult with. So having mentors, having partners, having advisors ready. And these are people that you can go to before your business is even like a thing. You can start building these groups now to help you understand, do I need to pivot? Don't I need to pivot? And these can be simple conversations. I also love what you said about just try doing it. Try it. Like maybe you don't have time to like research data and see if there's really a market for your business because you don't have time, but you do have an idea and you want to try it. You know, like you said, take on a client, take on one or two clients and see if that can produce something that's viable, that then you start your business and file for your LLC. And so there's kind of like a trial and error period of allowing yourself to have that and that knowing that you are prepared for it to fail or not as a business owner and starting out. But even if you're further down in your business, is something that the last thing that you shared that it's been the most valuable to me right now. And even thinking about it is just that like understanding your value and setting those things early. And so I just think that a lot of times, and it doesn't matter. I mean, you know, what and what your values are. It may not be that you value, you know, meaningful connections, right? And whatever you're doing and creating, that's not a part of your values, then that may not necessarily be important to you in whatever business endeavor you're pursuing. I know for me as an artist, what's valuable to me is telling transformational stories. I like telling female Black women stories that we see them transform. We learn about their humanity and not just, you know, them as an icon, right? And so that's important. So when I read a script or when I say yes to a job, those things are on the top of my mind. Right. And if the script is not that, or if the show is not that, I'm at the place now as a creative that I'm just like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to even waste the time. And it's not waste. I don't want to waste their time auditioning because I don't feel like I'm the best storyteller for that. And it's not what's going to move my brand forward.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so I ask you now, like, because I know that you are really involved in strategizing and development and thinking through, you know, scaffolding a process. You know, is values the first thing that you think of when you're consulting and helping someone? And like, what are some of the steps that you start to lay out on how to scaffold and think about how you can succinctly create a business plan for yourself and the values of your business.
Yeah. It's funny, I smiled and I'm like, our values. And I'm working on an independent project right now too. And I'm like, and don't get me wrong, I still have a whole network of people, right? Like even at this space in my work, I have a tribe that still gathers me up very quickly and is like, no,
right.
Or, and like case in point, I posted today like this and I texted my group and I'm like, I want to vomit. And they're like, oh, look at you on social media. Good job. Right. So I think that we all still have those pieces of us that are accolades aside, experience aside, it is still nerve-wracking doing this work. Right. And so I would say that I don't start with values first. Right. I start the what do you want to do? And why? And who's your market? Or who do you think your market is? And sometimes I have clients and I've had conversations where organizations are already established, are off and running. But things like pandemics happen. And what you thought was your market is not your market anymore, right? And teaching flexibility of like, hi, you might have to do something you've never done before. Are you ready? Right? And here's the plan to do it. The values conversation, right? After you kind of set your intention on, I want to do blank, right? I always say, have a little bit of flexibility in the blank, because normally we don't always arrive at the blank in a straight line. It takes a second to kind of probably get back there. And that's just the trusting of the process. The values piece comes in with what are your non-negotiables? Right? So your non-negotiable is, if this is not a transformative story about Black women, I'm not doing it. That's a non-negotiable.
Right.
So we have your values, which is like, I'm going to take this client on. My non-negotiable is this thing right here, right? And non-negotiables look very different. It can look different depending on the client. It can look dependent on what the actual product is that they might be looking for, right? In some of my work where there's bigger organizations involved, we look at like organizational mission statements, right? And go, you're not actually in line. Or having a conversation and saying, hi, remember when you made that comment about this? Are you sure that I'm the person you want to go walk that line with? Right? So then the values piece comes in, right? But also saying like, what will you bend on and what are you not going to bend on? And if you're bending on something, what's your limit? And I think for me over time, I think my toughest piece of doing that has always been around working with like people in my network that I've known for a very long time and negotiating the need and the desire to help. And then realizing like, ooh, we are not actually aligned business-wise. And that's always the tough one, right? That's always where it gets really tough. For me, of like, okay, you get, it's like the family discount or like the expectation that you're going to give the discount because it's like, well, we go way back, or just, understanding everybody's different understandings of business acumen, right? And that is a trajectory too. So I've become every relationship, every consultancy, I learn something new about myself, right? And sometimes I'm like, I got to shift this. Recently I decided that like, I'm not compromising on my rate anymore. I can't. But that came from like a journey within myself of saying like, it's okay to not compromise on your rate,
Right.
which is hard, right? When you're like, but I really am committed to this work that you guys are doing and I want to help you so much, but like, I'll help you, just how much can you afford, right? Wrong. Don't ever do that. No one ever do that, right? No one ever say how much can you afford. No matter how much you want to help somebody.
You'll be angry. You'll be angry. I'm always angry when I compromise my rate because I'm always saying, doing a lot of work and I don't have the money to show for the time that I spent doing this work.
Listen now. Okay. So, and again, my tribe had to gather me up and we're like, now you know better than that. So I just think, right, like, that's what I mean about like the value piece is that some of these things that we know are deeply ingrained in us and not straying away from that necessarily to a space where you're like, I'll compromise for this. When you, if that thing on the inside is telling you don't compromise ever, like ever, then don't compromise for whatever that thing is. And I think that that is something that I always tell people in the beginning of like, set your rate. I mean, I have a conversation with my husband all the time. Like, set your rate, set your, you know, and he's an artist, like set these things in stone. And are you comfortable? I always ask the question no one ever asked me, right? Is like, if you are going to compromise, are you comfortable with the compromise? And if a yes comes back, it's like, okay, you're good. Because if something happens, you're okay with the fact that you compromised. I never asked myself that. And when things have happened, I'm like, I'm not okay with the fact that I compromised, right? So I just think that like, it's just something that is something that I do think about and that I do coach on after. It's kind of the, what do you want to do and what are your non-negotiables? And what can test the non-negotiables, right? Like what makes the non-negotiables maybe. And where do you see yourself in going with that? And that's proved to be pretty helpful.
I like that. And I like that you are making separate language for what a pivot looks like for in your business, right? And because you've had experience and then you've done the thing, like you've said, this is what I want to do, and you've done it, and you're realizing I'm not getting the return that I want,
right.
Which is different from a compromise. That is like, okay, I'm doing the thing and I'm seeing what I'm getting the response back, I'm getting the market, but I'm also sometimes being asked to do this. And am I comfortable with that? And if I'm not, that's just not what I do. And that's my non-negotiable. And so having language for these things, I think is also so important especially for people of color, because I think we get asked often to bend and flex and move in ways that others do not. And I think this is leading up to my next big question and bigger conversation, is around kind of the nature of how the system operates for people of color, and how it is not, there are sometimes different asks, it's just different. It is different for us. It's different for a Black woman to have a consulting business than a white woman to have a consulting business. And if we think that it's not, then we're not telling whole truths. You know what I mean? And I think it's different for me as a Black woman, as an artist, as an actor, than it is for a white woman as an actor. And you can make all these comparisons, whatever. But the reality is that the arts business world operates different for POCs. And
1 second, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Don't worry. I know. When there's children in the room, I know.
Sorry. So when I'm not doing my job, I am a mother of 2 children. And my husband just attempted to, my 3-year-old has no concept of like, she doesn't care.
Oh, it's their world. That's like it's everything is theirs, and it's their world and it's their time. Please. I get it.
And maybe if I ran the consulting business like she lives her life, I would probably be a very wealthy woman.
Maybe we all lived our lives as 3-year-olds. Be careful what we want.
Right? She has no kids in the world at all. Like, she's completely unbound by the simple fact that, like, I am working.
Yes.
But
yes. So to the point, it is different. The business world, it also operates under a racial lens.
Absolutely.
And so when we're thinking about like non-negotiables and this language you put out of ways of thinking, structuring, or how you're going to do your business, what do you want to do? What are your non-negotiables? What are things you're willing to compromise on? Are you comfortable with that compromise? Not like, oh, I can do it. Are you comfortable with that compromise? And then realizing that it's going to come in your business. You're going to be asked more often to do the compromise and the thing that you do. And so how do you move with intention and not feel overwhelmed or frustrated by some of the things that you may come up against as a person of color? What are some things that you would give advice to, at all stages, people of color at all stages of their business? They may be in ideation, they may be, in the middle, starting up, they maybe have been around for a few years, but are seeing the landscape, and are feeling the feelings, frustration, sometimes just kind of discouragement, I think. And sometimes anger that then allows for like non-movement. Mm-hmm. So what are some ways of moving forward, but acknowledging the reality?
Yeah. So I think it's such a powerful question, right? Because I think that oftentimes in my experience, when I've engaged in this conversation, people tend to think that, you will be asked to compromise a lot by non-BIPOC groups. That's actually not in my experience, right? And the experience of other consultants, other entrepreneurs, other artists in my network, it's not the non-BIPOC group. It's the BIPOC group that asks for the compromise, right? Which I think is the most jarring and alarming part, because on one hand, right, the expectation is, these are my tribe, these are my people, I want to help my people, and I want to reach back, right? By the other token, we also know that outside of the consultancy structures, just the way that organizations, nonprofits, schools, things like that directly impact our communities are funded, they are receiving less funding. So you may actually have to compromise, right? That is a thing. I've never been asked by a non-BIPOC client to come down on my rate, I state the rate and they're like, that's perfect for us. Thank you. We'll meet you right where you are. Right. And so what I would always say to that is that it's really healthy to understand where the asks might be coming from and the why. And having a really good filter. Are you just trying to get a discount because you just want a discount? Or are you, as a business, being really transparent and saying, this is my budget line for professional development, or this is my budget line for professional services. This is what I have. Can you work within this budget line? And it's still in your court to say yes or no. And I think that is the freedom of BIPOC consultants, and specifically Black and Brown consultants, to understand and to ask that question. What is your budget, right? And now the budget may be told to you transparently, and that depends on the relationship. And that's kind of why I do those intro conversations and kind of watch for nonverbal cues. But asking that question ahead of time and saying, what is your budget for this project? Now, if you already have in your mind at this point, you're like, look, my rate is this, this, and this, but this level of work is going to take me X amount of months. It's going to take me this amount of energy and time. And you know what your number is in your mind. And if their budget is so low that you're like, when we were talking about it, like, oh, I took that thing and I shouldn't have took that job, right? at least you know going into it, and the ball is still in your court. And I think for Black consultants and Latinx consultants, right, it's important to note the ball is always in our court, right? Like, historically, we are not taught to think that way. The ball is always in your court. If someone is coming to you for a service, even if you're going out and you're marketing yourself, you're not begging for clients, you're doing marketing. So even if someone comes to you, right, or you go to somebody and you pitch an idea and they're like, yeah, I'm all in and I want X, Y, Z, and you produce a number and they're like, well, can you come down? No, I can't. No, I can't, right? And I also tell people, don't ever find yourself trying to justify your number either, right? Like, because you might be asked to do that. Oh, well, why? And I had a client who, not the immediate group that I was working with, but part of their funding stream, most likely had an issue with my Blackness. And there were, in our conversation, she was the barrier. And I knew that I was going to compromise that because the work of the other group was way more important than this one person. But in my work with the group, I let them know she is a barrier. You will probably get but so far. Right? And so still that ball was in my court. I did not have to work with her directly. You know, it was just a one conversation I had to get through, and that was okay for me. For some consultants, that's not okay. And knowing that those kinds of conversations or those kinds of interactions can be not okay, I think is equally as important too. So I think with the structure, being able to check in, being able to ask questions, right? Ask your clients, your potential clients questions. Ask them questions. And if something doesn't seem right and it seems shaky from the beginning, it's going to be shaky all throughout and it's going to be shaky at the end. It doesn't really change, right? That's kind of the tone. The tone is really set from the beginning. So I would say, unless if you're really tied to the work and you're like, look, this is my pro bono project, right? Then treat it as such. Or if you are at a space where, you know, someone is like, well, can you come 5,000 down because we actually have to shift funding, this, that, and the third. And it's like, let me think about that. Don't, right? We talk about this in just kind of negotiating for a job and salary. Don't say yes immediately. Think about it for a second. Run your numbers, right? And you're not desperate for work, right? Because that also can put you in a space of, oh my gosh, I have to take this client on. And I think a last note to this also, which I think is really important to mention, is about the social currency, which is something that a lot of consultants don't think about. You may take on a client that is your gateway client to a whole nother set of resources. If that client says to you, I can't afford your rate, but I can do this, but you know that they will probably be your gateway client, meaning the work that you get to do for them, the stamp that you get to put on it, will most likely bring you more revenue than you can possibly ever think about. You take the client, because the social currency is higher than what they might be able to pay you at the time. But being able to know that, right, is where like the coaching really comes into play, and asking your network of like, should I do this? And then the question that you ask yourself, if your network is not there yet, right, and you're at the beginning of your network, you're the one that's stepping out, is what is the benefit of this client?
Yeah.
And that's an important question.
And I think this, and I want to continue this talk about social currency. Even when you're talking, because I know you're referencing a lot, speaking from the chair of like how you sit as a business owner of a consulting business, but I think this applies to any type of creative organization. And I love what you said too, that like, and I want to just restate it so we remember this because it is important, that not all the time are you asked to compromise because it's like, oh, people in my community or my people that I serve don't value my work. It's that they don't have resources too. There is a systemic problem. And we have to acknowledge that. And I think that there are ways to work around it. But again, if we don't know social currency, like what is valuable to us at the time, we will not be able to kind of create a value proposition for a potential partnership. So for example, and I just want to, because I want to really drive this point home that like, I don't want your words to be misconstrued to think that like, oh, it's just always going to be that if you're working with, BIPOC communities, it's going to be difficult, right, to get money to find the thing that you do. And I don't think that you were saying that at all, but I want to clarify and say, it is the reality of the business world that their access to resources, access to time, access to capital, on both sides, right? Somebody providing a service, somebody asking for a service, are limited because of the history of our world, right?
Absolutely.
And specifically our social history. But it doesn't mean that we have to continue to perpetuate those cycles of lack. And like you said, I don't have to, every client is not my client. There are things I don't have to do. But again, what are all the other places in between, like you said, that where that social currency does work for me? And so it's not me wasting my time and money because I'm going to get access to a larger community, or that if I am able to ask better questions, and it's like, oh, what is really valuable is this for you. Okay, that actually doesn't cost that much for me to give that to you. I just, when you were asking for this larger thing or this a bit more ambiguous thing, that was going to be harder for me to provide for you, and vice versa, for you to be able to pay me for, right? But if we are able to have a conversation that says, oh, okay, what can we find synergy on? What can we find ways of working together? It may just be that like, I'm doing this thing for you, right? I'm just an ambassador for I'm not your marketing. I'm not the head of marketing because I can't do that for you because you can't afford me, but I can, to my networks, put your things on blast, right? And that is something that I can find some other people that can do that for you. You know what I mean? Like that we find ways of how we can work and how we can move forward in our business. And that also, like you said, is knowing your budget, knowing what you need at different stages of your business and where you're at. And even in the span of a year, oh, I do have room. I did hit my mark for what I need to make for this quarter. I can sit down and give you this time for free because I think that we are going to build a longer term relationship.
Exactly. And that intro piece, right? And that is really important in the work because consulting work is based on a network and it's based on a relationship, right? And the balance is very necessary, right? Yes, you will have your high paying clients that will keep you around again and again and again and again and again and again and again, right? And you will have the one task client where it's like, here's our whole total budget. And you're like, okay, you actually can't afford me to do the whole of this project, but I will charge you this amount and I will walk you to get you to who needs to, right? That's invaluable to an organization, to clients, right? The educational piece, that is so important. And I think that you said, right, which, yeah, I don't want my words misconstrued, but just understanding that overall, even the fact that there is help desk is free, right? That is a step in the direction of trying to make some equity. And just how do you even get started in stepping out as an entrepreneur, which is just radical rebellion for people of color anyway, in today's times, right? So just even having that resource that you don't have to pay for. Access to people that will say, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and it's removing the financial burden, right? Of like, okay, there are pro bono legal services out there, right? because you think about it, I might need bylaws drawn up. I may need this. I can't afford someone hourly. I'm not there yet. And again, right, that kind of investment versus going into debt in your business. And so what I'll, to end on this piece, I will say, also understanding your moral code. I take a combination of both, right? I do my research on my clients. I do my research on their organizations. I know how much that they can probably afford. And I'm like, you work with kids? I have kids. I'm a retired educator. That means a lot to me. Okay. I write the contract. It's a lot less. I don't beat you over the head. But because I'm not going to beat you over the head, part of our conversation is that I'm going to tell you things that are going to really severely improve your business. Because for me, morally, as a Black woman, I need to be able to reach back and pull with me as many times as I possibly can. So if I have information that's really, really important, that's going to help your demographic, just know that what you are paying for, right? Because the social currency on the opposite side too, is that I'm going to tell you things that are really going to grow your organization. And we may never speak again after this, right? You may never need me again after this, which is then I did a good job, right? Then there are some things that are just quick and dirty jobs, right? I need you to write a document. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. I need you to draw a contract. I need you to, no problem. Let me review a couple of documents. Okay, my flat rate is this. Okay, I reviewed it. That's it, right? And so it's healthy to have both. And I think that like knowing that, right, of mission-driven work or just kind of the one-off things, right? And sometimes the one-off things are your big paydays, to be honest.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Knowing, like you said, that kind of balance of like, I can help the organization that is serving kids in my neighborhood and is serving those that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, but they can only afford to pay me $20. I will give you $1,000 worth of time for your $20 because I believe in the work that you're doing. And then I may have someone that says, okay, you need me to write these 10 documents. It's going to be $6,000. And they cut the check and you're like, okay, great. Right. I'm not morally invested in what you're doing. I wrote it's paper. So I think that like knowing that, feeling comfortable in that, right, are what I think drives the consultancy work as Black and brown entrepreneurs, right? It's you want that balance.
And those categories. I love how you just created those categories, and you can do that ahead of time, right? Yeah. Whatever it is, like, what do I want to do, right? What are all the different categories that live in the thing that I want to do, right? And then saying, oh, I got this big payoff because I know that was just me getting money to get to be able to then do the thing where I am morally connected and I know I'm not going to get the financial payback in the same way, but morally there's a moral payback or a social payback that I'm getting, and being able to see that, so that then I'm just thinking about, like you said, diversifying what I do, it all falls under the umbrella of what I do, but there are other categories that they fill, and knowing what those are. And someone like you, Morgan, if you don't have someone like Morgan, Dr. Morgan J. Freeman Jenkins, I was going to say Freeman Jenkins in your corner, I just think that it's very important to have access to someone with such a great mind as you. And that's what Help Desk provides. Because there are a lot of people who don't have, like you just said, who don't have the access to someone to ask these hard questions, to say, okay, how are you going to do this thing? Or what do you really want to do? Is it still in line with your non-negotiable, right? To sit there, and so that you can do that critical thinking. Not everyone has someone like that on their team or in their advisors or in their camp. And to have access to you in this way, a mind like yours in this way, is invaluable. And so if you have not taken the time to sign up for Help Desk and sign up for a one-on-one with Dr. Jenkins, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know what you're doing with your time, because it's, I just think all the time in my work, how wonderful it would have been for me to be able to sit with someone without having to have too much together. I think sometimes we think, oh, I have to have this thing together. I have to know this.
Just start, right? Just start. It's free. Have the conversation. I know at the end of this, like, you'll tell people how to get in contact. Like, I have a ton of availability up on Help Desk. Like, have the conversation, even if you're starting with a mustard seed of an idea. If you're pedaling around something, like, I think I might want to, right? Like, you don't have to have a whole portfolio prepared. You don't. Have the conversation. Have as many conversations as you want. There's no cap on how many times you can sign up. Like, just have all the conversations you need. Because I wish, right, that I had something like this. And in hindsight, probably if I did, I probably wouldn't have this kind of level of experience of stumbling around in the dark, figuring it out. But I think that you could spare people. But I had really great friends, right? Colleagues that knew how to ask amazing questions, right? That knew me well enough to say, have you thought about this? What about that? And it's like, oh, I never thought about that. Right? Okay. You know, I probably owe them parts of my business at this point, right? For all of the free consultancy that they give me of like, do not do that. Or like, why haven't you started that yet? Right? I have those. Remember when you said you were going to do the thing and you haven't done the thing yet. So I would definitely say, like, to people that are listening, to people that, like, take advantage of this, right? Like, these things are such an asset. And they're so important because these are conversations that are happening outside of our communities, right? And to have this with inside of our community, and however we would choose to define community is up for interpretation, but to have it here, to have so many qualified consultants, experienced consultants, right? So much diversity of thought, so much diversity of experience, like, in one place, in one.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Is absolutely phenomenal and invaluable.
I would just encourage you not to waste it. We're going, I'm going to do the whole spiel again. I have one more question for you, Morgan, because
Sure.
I definitely be remiss if I didn't mention what you shared earlier, your extensive work in DEI, and thinking about it strategically. And so I guess, what are some things that you would also share, maybe some points of advice around, like, when you're trying to think, not to check a box in your work, but to be intentional, and because, and I'm sure you've seen this in the industry, now everyone is a diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, every organization in the theater, I know, in many different arts organizations, they have the ambassador or the person who is, like, versed in DEI work. And sometimes that person just sits on the sidelines. They just check the box for that organization. But I think that especially the communities that we like to serve, we are seeking to serve at ABC, they're looking to be more intentional. And so what are some pointers or ways of thinking that allow for a more intentional application of diversity, equity, and inclusion, lens to the work that an organization may want to do?
Such a great question. I have to bill you for that. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, you do.
Probably extra. But this is my secret. No, the first thing that I can say to that is research. If you want to walk away from the checkbox, you understand that, yes, in the field, there are diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, and belonging best practices, right? But it's the application of the best practice. And the application of the best practice is paramount on understanding and targeting it to your organization. So where people do the checkbox, right, as they're like, I went to this conference, I read this book, I did these things, and so I do these 5 things, I'm doing these 5 things here. Okay, but what if 3 of those things don't have anything to do with your organization? Right? Or
Correct.
what if those 5 things, right, are only diversity? They're not equity initiatives. They're not inclusion initiatives or belonging, right? And nor are they starting to scratch at, if your organization is like this, scratching at what it means to be a social justice driven organization, right? And so what I always encourage people to do, right, is really understand and start at the very foundational piece of like, and this is my favorite one, is like, go look at your handbook. I bet you'll find all your DEI issues in your handbook. It'll be around leave policies. It'll even be down to how you refer to employees in the handbook. Right? Just a simple title of like maternity leave versus parental leave.
Come on.
Okay. So if you want like a document to start there. And it all kind of trickles out after that. Or I tell organizations, go and start having focus group conversations with everybody and ask them what is it like to really honestly work there and have it done by somebody who's independent. They'll tell you. Because what people tend to misconstrue or misunderstand about diversity, equity, inclusion work is they think that it lives in a silo. It's actually human work. It's work of the heart. It doesn't live in a silo. So just because now we have this really beautiful, sexy title, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI officer, equity officer, right? You have all these very beautiful titles, right? Palatable titles. It's basically don't be a jerk at work. That's really what DEI work actually is, right? You can coin that. You all feel free to use that. Don't be a jerk at work, okay? Because that's what DEI work actually is. Are you running around the office being a jerk? And if you are, you're probably violating a number of things. And does the handbook support the things that you're doing? Maybe, maybe not, right? Are you always promoting the same amount of people and never this other group of people? Why? Do you have hidden structures in your organization that you're not even aware of? Can you quantify these certain things? And if you come back and you say no, that's your DEI work right there. It's not as complex as people like to make it, right? My favorite one that I love when people say this to me is like, what about hiring? And it's like, okay, tell me about hiring. And they're like, well, our team is not racially diverse. And I'm like, okay. Tell me more about that. Right. Do you have an initiative behind that?
Right.
Because like the checkbox is, you say, I'm going to hire X% of BIPOC people.
Right.
Okay, congratulations. Have you started to examine any of the practices you have here to keep them here or to help them feel like they belong here? Right? Most times they're like, oh, what do you mean by that? See? Okay, now you've brought the people, diversity, right? You brought them here, but you can't keep them here. How come? Why? What's happening? What's happening in your culture? Right? Or I love this other one because, you know, it's near and dear to my heart as mom. They're like, we want to hire more mothers. Okay, but you only give people 5 sick days.
Right.
What mother is coming to work at your job if you're only giving 5 sick days? I can tell you in a calendar year of having 2 children that I will be sick more than 5 times, or my child will be sick more than 5 times. Right. And then that means that my husband and I are going to have to try to negotiate who stays home with what sick child. And that's the hope that one doesn't get the other one sick. Or what if I am a single parent? Right. Or what if my partner can't take off of work? So now I look back at my new job that I just got as a mom because you only give me 5 sick days, which means I actually will come to work sick. And
I think that it's so, these questions are so important to ask at the top, that like, if we're trying to center this work, it is the thinking of like the whole human existence at the top, even if there's only 2 people that work in your organization. And you, but if you are considering them early, if you're thinking about these things, I think about that around accessibility work as well. That's awesome.
Yes, that's where I was going next, right? We everybody started to jump and put these very beautiful, right, like clauses on their job descriptions. Okay, now we have them here, and you're gonna turn around and they say I need a larger monitor to work from home. You're gonna be like, no, it's not in the budget. Well, the person is visually impaired. What do you mean you're not getting them a monitor? That's DEI work. That means that I have got you here. Check my diversity box. I'm including you in the work, but I'm also saying, hey, check this out. Because you can't see, I won't give you a monitor. Because not in my budget, but you can't see. So how am I expecting you to do your work? And then now you're working here and you're going to turn around, your performance is going to slip because you can't see. And forget the fact that I even have to try to create an environment for you to feel comfortable enough to come and tell me that this is what you need, especially if you're dealing with people of color. I need this to be great at my job. And then I turn around and I tell you no. So I think that, like, you know, we tend to overcomplicate diversity, equity, inclusion work, right? Or we either overcomplicate it or oversimplify it. And if you are really, as an organization, dedicated and are centering that work, you are centering everybody, even those that you may deem are difficult to work with or who have differing ideas politically, ethnically, religiously, etc., because they matter too. Correct. And I think that in my experience is the most difficult part for organizations that are like, we do DEI work. Okay, but you're excluding a whole subset of your whole organization. And it's like, what? Right. No, but you are. You've shifted so far over that now you're excluding a whole group of people. Right. You can't do that. Remember how not to be a jerk at work, right? So you can't exclude a whole group of people. And I think the last piece of that too, of your question, is accountability is key. Yeah. Everybody's got to be on board, and everybody, tippy top, including your board of directors, like all the way up, all the way down to the lowest paid person on staff, interns, volunteers, etc., all have to be held accountable to whatever you're stating is what you all are doing. The moment that somebody is not held accountable is the moment that you have a problem and the whole thing just falls apart. So I think that, like, those are some things that I would definitely say early on in kind of strategy.
Yeah, questions to ask, things to look and assess. Because I think, like you said, it's human work, and it's important when you're strategizing and thinking through your business to think about it at the front. If that is the value that if that's the value in the community and the ways you want to be moving with intention and care, then it's not something you tag on or check a box in. And I love that you said, look at your handbook. Like, that's a place to start. Even if you don't have the start is the handbook, because that's a hardcore document of ways that you can say, this is how we want to be held accountable. This is how we want to be moving with intention around human justice, right? And I think that is a beautiful way to end this conversation. Dr. Morgan Brittany Jenkins, I thank you so much for this time. I'm going to share my screen again very quickly, just to remind our friends that are watching who you are. You can have deeper and more in-depth conversations with Dr. Morgan J. Freeman of Freeman and Morgan Jenkins of Freeman and Associates. You can also meet with many of our other consultants through Help Desk. I'm just going to walk you through the steps of Help Desk right now. So step one, if you are interested in Help Desk, please take the time to go to our website, www.artsbusinesscollaborative.org/programs/help-desk, and sign up. There's a huge sign on that webpage that allows you to sign up for free. Takes 10 minutes, if that. And then you can plug into the 3 different access points of Help Desk. First is Create a Study, an organization we are partnering with that gives free arts business courses and educating around finance, marketing, legal strategies, whether to be an LLC or a 501c3 or sole proprietorship, and what are the benefits to either, all of those choices. So you could have just a good little 30-minute video, and these are all consultants and teachers local to New York City, NYU, Columbia, but also they're arts business owners themselves that give you pointers on how to move so that you can start thinking about these things more intentionally. And then you can come to a one-on-one with our consultants. We offer one-on-one consultations. These are 1 hour segments of your time. They have tons of different times available, and you can sign up. And then lastly, if you want to be reminded of some of the nuggets of beautiful advice that this conversation has given us and past conversations we've had at Meet the Consultant, you can go to our YouTube page. Arts Business Collaborative, our name of our page on YouTube, and watch. Right after we end this, you'll be able to watch everything that was shared to remind yourself of some things that you want to go back to and think about some of these learning points and tips. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I want to say thank you again for your time. Thank you for those that come to watch. And I hope you have a wonderful night.
Have a good night.